trying to still do 4 things at one time. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope that you haven't gotten your feel of us today or this weekend, even though we usually take the weekends off. You've seen us, this is the 9th time since Saturday, right, Steve?
Yeah, we've been like pushing it out there, haven't we?
We have content machines. Let's say hello real quick before we get into some announcements and some follow-up from earlier's stream. Let's say a quick hello to Alan Gurdon. Is that how you say your last name, sir?
It is indeed, Kyle. Yep. How's it going, everyone?
Excellent. Nice to meet you.
Cheers. You too.
Steve's jealous already because Gurdon has a glorious beard, and so Steve's already upset about that. So it'll be okay.
I thought he might have been my long lost pappy from down under. You know.
Steve always has something so awkward.
Dad, is that you?
So
right now,
let's go to a couple quick announcements about what's coming up, and then a really quick touch on what transpired after the stream 2 hours ago, because it's been a crazy 2 hours, very eventful 2 hours. And then we'll jump into the serious talk that we're going to have tonight, which is what's going on in New Zealand. But tomorrow we have a discussion or a debate. We'll see which way it branches off, depending on what mood Steve's in. You know how he is. He's going to be talking to John Perry from Stated Clearly on the proposition, is DNA a code? And so look forward to that. I wanted to give a quick shout out to a Noah Watzer. Noah, if you are watching, you left a really great comment that it just made my year, and it was about the show and Steve and I, and I just want to take a second to let you know that we appreciated it big time. That's why we do what we do, and we are definitely glad that you're enjoying it. But thank you for that. That meant a lot. The last thing that I will throw out there is that on Thursday we were going to be doing another debate roulette. If we can't get our original thing together, there's some scheduling conflicts going on that we're having to move in some shows around. So if we can't get one just cleanly switched, we will do debate roulette on Thursday. So if you are interested in coming on the show and debating a topic, we'll probably go in the direction that we did last time with the controversial topics. That was really cool. So we'll throw some more in there. But if you are, tomorrow I'll put a channel in the Discord. Go ahead down there and let us know if you're interested in coming on, because I think we're going to do it a little bit differently than waiting for people to come on the show. We'll actually get some people ahead of time. That way we're not having to spend so much time waiting, and there's not that kind of drag there. Okay, so before we get into the talk, I wanted to touch briefly on some things that happened following our stream 2 hours ago. We did a stream where we talked about Andrew Rappaport and some of the dishonest things that he was doing, and showing where there were some discrepancies in what he was saying versus the story that was coming out. And we got anonymously a message of him saying that the person that he was talking to should flag the video and be removed because it's what was the exact word, Steve?
It was that should be reported for basically not telling the truth, basically.
Right, but that's the funny thing, that we were showing the discrepancies on his end. So basically, that tells you everything you need to know. What he does is harmful, and it's not something that should go unchecked. And when checked, he opted to tell people to go and flag the video down because he couldn't come on here and answer for it. So that should tell you everything you need to know. And we're not going back on our word. That's the last you're going to hear about Mr. Rappaport, because it's just not worth the time. So, Steve,
let me read actually says. Yeah, let me read what it says on this, because it's actually persecution porn. It's more persecution porn. He says, please report it as harmful since he is using these lies to get people to attack me. No, I'm pointing out
which we never did.
And by the way, the truth is always a valid justification and always a thing of innocence. So if anybody wants to point out that we were not truthful or about, that's fine. I actually had one person today that said he was going to watch the video the other day and say he was going to watch the video and tell me if he thought Andrew lied. And this is a member, or at least a person who's involved with the Council of Google Plus, Christian, and was going to go talk to his brother in Christ in private. He got through 5 minutes of the video and said, "Oh, you made all these mistakes about Council of Google Plus. I couldn't watch anymore." I was like, "You dishonest piece of shit." I was like,
well,
you need to follow through your word and tell me whether you're going to call them out or not. And if you're not, then you're not. Then you know what? I don't need around, and I'm blocking people. I'm not.
But
I'm tired of playing this apologetics. Yeah, that was my last word. I'm happy.
That's enough. That's enough about that. We're moving on from that. Just if you think that there was anything in discrepancy wise, let us know.
Yeah,
otherwise,
I'll fix that shit. Yeah, sure.
We're moving on. So tonight we are going to be discussing a very it's not a pleasant thing to talk about. I was telling a friend of mine when they were asked about what tonight's show was about that I have a hard time watching the Sarah McLachlan commercials. Over here we have the ASPCA, Alan, and it's for shelter pets and people for the ethical treatment of animals. That's those sort of organizations. They do a video package or a commercial where they show like dogs out in two cramped kennels in the snow or chained to a fence, and they just look so pitiful. And anytime I hear that song now, it triggers me where I can't even be in the room. I have to like dive for the remote to change the channel, and animal cruelty just to me is disgusting. So I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself and what you do and why you do what you do, and then let us know why we're here and what New Zealand is facing there now, because it's getting to be pretty bad, I hear.
Certainly is. Yep. Okay, so I'm a 54-year-old born and bred West Coaster. I live on the west coast of the South Island in New Zealand. For about 64 years now, our government has used the insecticide or pesticide called 1080, which is sodium monofluoroacetate. This has been labelled by the EPA as one of the most toxic chemical weapons on the face of the planet. In New Zealand, they have been experimenting on this, as I say, for about 64 years. They have been using New Zealanders and the wildlife in New Zealand as guinea pigs. Basically, we are one big lab experiment in this country. So a bit of background into how 1080 works. It's a tasteless, odorless chemical produced was produced in Alabama in the Toll Chemical Company. I understand that has been shut down at the moment. So we have been importing this for a lot of years. It used to be used in the Forest Service to control rats, mice, and possums. Variants of that have been used to control rabbit populations and that. In the late 60s, when the Forest Service closed down, we were instituted with an organisation called the Department of Conservation, which couldn't be a sicker joke. These people have a mindset that they need to rid New Zealand of all pests and predators. This has been accomplished by changing laws in the government. Laws on what constitutes waterways have been changed. We have a Resource Management Act in New Zealand that's supposed to protect nature and people from harm. So we have a group of people that are hell-bent on destroying all these pests, as I say. Now, this started off a long time ago as a war on what they call TB, or tuberculosis. This was used for a number of years as an excuse to use this pest control agent. Now, this isn't something that they go around and just put in traps or that. They drop this stuff by air with helicopters. They have done for a great many years. When they first started earlier on in the piece, they were using planes with poison carrot baits, and that's carrots that have this poison sprayed over them. The Forest Service itself used to use it as a gel to mix with jam and put out for possums to eat. So this war on TB is how this apparently started, for them to justify their use of this chemical. Now, don't forget, we're talking about a chemical weapon of mass destruction here. This is not just a pesticide. It works on the Krebs cycle, and anything that breathes oxygen or turns food, light, oxygen into energy is affected by this. It shuts down the cell's ability to produce that energy from that food, light, and oxygen that we receive. In a non-lethal dose situation, this will damage cells. It doesn't build up in your body over time, as had it explained to me. It will metabolize out of your body, but those cells that have been damaged are left there. So we have massive sickness and health effects from years and years of this being dumped on our communities. They're not just content to dump it on the land, they actually dump it into our waterways. A lethal dose will kill sometimes quite slowly. It can take hours or days for these animals to die, or humans to die. It affects everything through the food chain, right down to the insects and all the microbes in the soil that help break down that leaf litter and fertilise all our bush. So now we're seeing an effect on the trees and other plants in our environment as well. This stays in our environment, it persists in our environment. It can be safely stored in an aqueous solution for many years and still be effective. It is a terrorist weapon, okay? So our Department of Conservation have been dropping this on the land, like I say, to get rid of TB. So the TB myth gets exposed, and we actually have a count of TB that is acceptable. We've had that TB got right down to a very low level. So when things like this start to happen and they realise there's not such a need for the 1080 anymore under the guise of TB, our government and DOC have allowed these government departments to inject live possums with the TB virus. Now, this is a biological warfare agent, basically, that they have let go in small groups right around our country to perpetuate their need to line their wallets. Now, as it's been used for such a long time, we're seeing the effects in society and in our landscape, in our bush now, as a result of this use. Most of our native birds have been plummeted to a level where they're now endangered. Our stock in our farms, our domestic pets are poisoned and killed by this all the time. There is many incidences of farmers having their stock killed. Back in, I think it was about 1996, there was 8,000 cows killed down at a place called Winton, which is further down in the South Island. Now, in the same place, funnily enough, they buried a large stockpile of this 1080 underground at a dump. This is leached out into the groundwaters and into these paddocks that these stock were farmed on. They've come up with the convenient excuse way back then that these cows all died from poisoning of Swedes, a certain genetic breed of Swedes that is grown for a winter stock food. We know, us people that have our eyes open, that this was nothing to do with Swedes. This was the contaminants leaching through the land. This is 8,000 cows killed and covered up. So all these drops kill a large amount of farmers' stock, and they are offered payouts by the Department of Conservation, or TB Free, which is one of the other groups that administer this deadly toxic poison to our land. And they're written off by the farmers writing an invoice in for stock food or fence damage or something else like that. So you never actually get the truth coming out into the public eye. So we've also had a media blackout on any effects of 1080 with regards to humans or stock in the past. We have a health system over here where we have medical officers of health that are supposed to take our safety into concern, but they are actually covering up all these incidences of 1080 poisoning with people and stock, and they have been covering these up for a hell of a long time. So now every time they do a drop in our communities, which is every 2 to 4 years, they're dropping it straight into the water. They're using false water tests to say that our water is still fine to drink. They are putting control samples in with these water studies. So 50% of those studies that come up with a clear result on our water are actually the controls that were taken before the drop. They don't test down to the right level. 1080 affects the unborn fetus in parts per trillion. They only test down to parts per billion, and they claim that they've never had many samples with much in it. The way that they get around these water tests is by doing it straight after a drop within 24 hours before there's been a rainfall, and all that 1080 can leach into the waterways. They also take samples from 300 millimetres down in the water, so they avoid the surface water, which has a large amount of dust and this toxin floating on top of it. So they've learnt by taking these samples where to test from to come up with these results. Now, the tests they're still relying on for the water samples are nearly 20 years old. From 1990 to 2000, they took 2,000 samples. So 1,000 of those were the controls, so they're no good to indicate it. They never test a reticulated water supply. They say they can't find it in it. So we have water supplies feeding our communities all the time, and we're drinking these non-lethal doses. So a non-lethal dose affects humans in other ways. It affects their ability to have children, their fertility. It affects pregnant women. It affects their fetus. A lot of babies are born with small kidneys, fused ribs, other congenital deformities, holes in their heart. A lot of women have miscarriages. We have huge spikes in our community that prove to us that there is a link between 1080 and these effects that it's having on the communities. But as I say, these medical officers of health keep covering all those incidences up, and they have done for years. So none of this ever makes the papers, and people aren't aware. So we've had 30 years of very serious Department of Conservation propaganda telling us that we have this TB problem and they have to poison, and it's the only answer. It's their ideal tool in their toolbox. There's other methods of ridding our country of these pests: trapping, shooting, like we've always done in New Zealand. We have a big culture over here of providing for our families off the land, and this is what they're trying to get rid of, is our ability to bring food home to our families from the land. I haven't been hunting myself for well over 8 years in my area because I don't know when I'm going to bring something home that will poison my family. Now, this has happened in New Zealand before, and yet again it's covered up. We've had tourists die in this country from 1080, and that has been covered up by our medical officers of health. A young American tourist, Whitney Roby, came to New Zealand about 6 or 7 years ago. She came into contact with a gel bait, which is another form of 1080, and that is 10% toxic. If you get it on your skin, you can't wipe it off and say sorry, you will die. Okay, so this young lady was 22 years old, fit and healthy, walking in our bush at Te Anau, and came into contact with this gel bait. She went back to her backpackers where she was staying in Queenstown and died of a massive heart attack. Her heart was taken by the American doctor, the Dunedin doctor, and sent to a New Zealand laboratory, a government laboratory for testing, and it miraculously disappeared. This is how they cover these things up. Coupled with this,
can I ask you?
Yep.
Let me break through real quick and just ask you. I'm getting some feedback. Are you hearing that? Steve?
Yeah, there's feedback, yes.
Are you watching the stream on your end by chance, or can you turn down your speakers? It may be looping back through, I think, and echoing off the space that you're in, Alan.
Okay.
I don't hear it now. Oh, you're good now. I don't hear it. I think it's gone.
Yep.
Okay, we're good. So I wanted to. I think people might not be under the. They may not know, and I didn't know this until recently. I think over here people take for granted the First Amendment, which is the freedom of speech, the freedom of being able to say what you want without persecution from government. that's not the case over there in New Zealand. Is that correct?
It's yeah, we certainly can't get our word out to the media. My friend and I got sick of all this happening, so last year we decided to do a hikoi to Parliament, which is a walk. That's the Maori word for a big walk. So my friend went to the tip of the North Island and I went to the bottom of the South Island, and we walked every step of the way over 2.5 months, educating the people of New Zealand as to what's actually going on. We've faced a lot of interference from the GCSB, which is our spy network over here, trying to interfere with our Facebook posts, blocking us from putting things out there. We've sent emails overseas that don't arrive. We've had a lot of interference. We've had the police on our case trying to shut us down by threatening and intimidating us at our own homes, and indeed out in town and that when we're doing our protests. I was given a promise if we did this hikoi to Parliament that our Prime Minister would meet us there and we would be able to give them a presentation of the truth of what's happening with 1080. She refused. I have not heard one word from any politician since. Okay, so we did this hikoi, we educated people, we got to Parliament and did some protesting over about a week. The only thing that ended up getting our cries into the media was we put some dead native birds and animals on Parliament steps. We threw some fake 1080 pellets out and we sat our children down in amongst that, so that the politicians and the people of New Zealand can see what we've had to live with as parents and what our children have to live with in these areas. They leave all this 1080 laying around on the ground. They leave all the dead, rotting carcasses of these animals that they have tortured to death laying in our waterways, and that enters into our water that we drink. So all this was covered up by our media, and that is controlled by the government. So when we did this protest and sat the stuff on Parliament, the Speaker of the House over here came out and claimed that we had bludgeoned these birds to death. Now that's the only thing that broke the media silence. Okay, what we did, this hikoi that we did, is a big thing in New Zealand, and it should have had fair and unbiased media coverage, but it doesn't get that. We still have a media blackout, and the only thing that they are prepared to show in this country is when they're trying to defame our name or make out that we're a bunch of terrorists. You know, if I'm a terrorist because I want clean drinking water and I want safe food for my child to eat, then so be it. Label me that. But we should have a right to get our word out. So we need to do that any way we can.
Sure. Talk to me about the dropping. Are they, when they do these droppings, are they like strategic areas? Does it happen on like a regular basis? And are they random? Like, is it all at one time when they come and do these drops, or do they hit specific areas across the country at different intervals?
So they've been very, very sneaky for the last 25, 30 years. What they've done is do a small area with a small community. Then they'll go to another part of the country and do another small area with a small community, because they know there's only ever one or two people like myself that know what is going on that will stand up against them. So every time they do a drop, they learn from what we do to try and stop them, and they increase their security. So we have security at every drop now, and they put a cordon around the area. You can't get in and film or anything. We are assaulted by these security guards and kept out of the way, and they have a free line to the police. They call the police in and back these drops up with the police now. Okay, so a wee while ago in New Zealand, I don't know if many of you Americans know about a threat to our milk powder by a terrorist who threatened to put pure 1080 into infant milk formula. Now that caused a huge stink right around the world and the country, as it should. So our police were forced into spending $5 million chasing this idiot around and interviewing people like myself, invading our homes and our privacy. And we all told them, you will find this person that has done this false flag attack at the top where all the poisoners hang out. And sure enough, one of those type 5 people was the person that made this threat. So The police did their job as they should have in that situation. But now we have the police standing there and condoning these drops and ensuring they happen by arresting people like myself and preventing us from stopping that active chemical warfare, that active terrorism from happening. My friend just got arrested the other week for going up and pulling the poison out of his water supply, his children's water supply. The police arrested him and charged him with trespass. They searched his house the other day to look for dead birds because we use them as proof. We need to get them tested. So they searched his house for that. So getting back to the drops and how they do them, they do these small areas all at once. And they know they've never got enough resistance to make a difference. If they did the whole of New Zealand at one time, there would be an absolute international outrage over what they do. They are poisoning the people blatantly. They are poisoning all our wildlife, our rivers, our water. They want this land free of anything that we can eat or survive off. And that's what they are achieving. So this year, because there's been a lot of resistance through our hikoi, waking people up, there's been a lot of protests nationwide. So what they've done this year is they've ignored all their safety requirements. They're putting up the notices before they drop, not dropping before school holidays, all that sort of thing, not dropping in the rain, not dropping in the wind. And they're going hell for leather to get all these stockpiles of 1080 dropped into our water supplies. They are specifically targeting all our waterways this year. Every one of these major drops this year encompasses a town or a city water supply. Got to ask yourself, why is that? They claim they only poison areas that you can't easily get into, but they're doing rolling pasture land and areas where we could trap and hunt these so-called pests easily. And there is no other answer except they are poisoning our water.
Yeah, I can't imagine why they would use poison that's water soluble. I mean, for any reason, I can't see why they would justify that, because when you have something that's going to be soluble in water, that's going to start at the very base of the food chain and work your way up to everything. I mean,
That's
nobody
right.
that does any kind of pesticides ever goes that route, because that's like a scorched earth kind of thing, correct?
It is a scorched earth, and it's happening right now. You know, they have obliterated 90% of our native species in the way of birds. They claim that New Zealand has no significant mammalian populations that are of concern. Well, hello, what the hell are we? We're mammals, you know. Even if they weren't targeting the water supplies, the nature of gravity and rain and dissolving means everything ends up in that water supply. All those dead rotting carcasses, all that 1080, that chemical weapon of mass destruction, it all ends up in our water supplies.
In what form is it dropped? Like, is it
okay? So they make
or
little pellets, and it's a cereal-based pellet. It has sweeteners added to it. Okay, so everything is attracted to it. Deer, pigs. It's a cereal. It's a grain-based product. Birds, everything eats it. You know, they're supposedly only targeting possums and stoats and rats. But this is what happens when you take large chunks of a food chain out. They take all the raptors away. Now, this is what happened in America. This is why it was banned in America. They used it and they noticed that all their species of raptors were disappearing. Your bald eagles and all that were all being killed. If you take those raptors away, then the control for those pest species is gone. So you have explosions of rats and possums and stoats. The weed species survive.
Yep. If a child was to get a hold of one of these pellets or have children, if you say it's in that kind of form, it seems like it would only be a matter of time before, you know, a kid out walking around or something would stumble upon it. Has that happened yet?
Not that we know of, but see, it's the school holidays over here right now, and they dropped right up to even, I think, within 24 hours of the school holidays starting. Now, these baits in a cold climate will stay there for months, okay? They're dropping it around all the walking tracks this year, and 100 metres from people's houses, for God's sake. You know, how far can a small child wander off your property?
Right.
Yeah, 100 metres.
That's what I wondered.
And they look like little They look like little lollies, mate, you know. It is only
Yeah.
a matter of time before somebody loses their child blatantly like that.
So it seems like to me, if this situation, with the situation being as dire as it is, what are people in New Zealand doing about it? Like, how did you get involved? Do you work with an organization specifically, or just?
We started up our own Facebook page. See, like I said, we have a media blackout. There's very little ways to communicate to a wide audience in
Sure.
New Zealand. So by doing this hikoi, my friend and I hope to wake a large amount of people up and get them to have a look on Facebook what was happening. We've got a
Sure.
great many activists over here that have been working for a long, long time on this. Some people as much as 50 years. We've had people pass on that have become sick and died, and they've fought it all their life, you know. There's a growing movement now because of what we've done to wake people up. We have hunters over here that have their own YouTube channels, and they have gone around and filmed all this death and destruction and cruelty and torture, because that's exactly what it is. Everything that dies of 1080 dies a most hideous death. It'll bring a
I've
grown
seen the
man to
pictures.
tears, mate. Watch a cow
Yep.
or a horse. Watch your own dog die. I've done that several times. I've watched my own dog die. I've watched my wife be poisoned by it. I've watched my son poisoned in the womb from it. He has health effects because of this as well, because we have drunk the water unaware of what's going on. So we do have a growing movement here, but it's limited by that media blackout. We have a really unscrupulous bunch of media in this country, and only very few dare to step away from that government and report the truth. The mainstream media is absolutely bought by the government.
I've seen the channel that you're talking about, and you're right. It's I don't recommend it. It's hard to look at. It's very hard to look at. But tell me this: in your opinion, what's the government's, or what do you think the government's end game is? Like, why would they insist and persist to do this this chemical? Like, what would be the end goal for them, essentially?
Okay, so there's a lot of different levels of the corruption. So I suppose three main ones. At a lower level, you have a Department of Conservation that has been given directives to get rid of the pest species. Cats were introduced into this pet species just the other week by Parliament. Now the politicians want to get rid of everybody's cats. Dogs will be next. Okay, I believe their end game on the lower level is to rid our country of the ability for people like myself to feed our families from the land. They have what's known as Predator Free 2050, which is a new initiative launched by our government last year. Now, Predator Free 2050 is an absolutely impossible goal. Okay, that means every mouse, rat, possum, stoat, cats now, and dogs next, they want it obliterated by 2050. The main backers of Predator Free 2050 are the main primary industries in New Zealand. So that is New Zealand Beef and Lamb, New Zealand Venison, Silver Fern Farms, Fonterra, the milk company, lots of other milk companies on board there, probably Watties, Heinz, all these major food companies back and sponsor this Predator Free 2050. And that is what I believe our government's agenda is on a lower level, is to get rid of all our food so that we are reliant on the supermarkets. They want to poison all our water so we can't run off to the hills when things get really bad with the New World Order type stuff, without putting the tinfoil hat on too much at the moment. So they've nearly succeeded. On the West Coast, we've had it used for a lot longer and a lot harder than any other part of the country. My hills up there are devoid of native birds. They are devoid of the deer and the pigs and everything we used to hunt. We have a few goats running around because they're pretty clever animals. Pigs are a little bit less susceptible to it. They can vomit up 8 or 10 times and get rid of it out of their system. It's on the bigger level, it comes up to a depopulation. I mean, we're all familiar with that, the New World Order and Agenda 21 and all that sort of thing.
Oh no.
We have Agenda 2030 in this country, and by 2030 they want us all living in little cities. They want to be zapping us with their 5G network and all this other Wi-Fi crap. They want us living from the supermarkets, and all these primary industries have an interest in that happening because they get to make the money. So at the same time all this 1080 poisoning is happening, we have a new bovine disease over here. I'm not sure if you're aware of that in America. They are culling thousands of cows off our farms. They have come up with this new disease, which is actually the effects of our stock eating and drinking from 1080 poisoned land. And it's a antibiotic resistance breeder, 1080, when you have it in non-lethal doses all the time. So we have cows that have antibiotic resistance to what they call mastitis, which is to do with their teats and their milking. We have a large amount of what's the word? The arthritis in their legs and feet. Now, this is what they are calling a disease. So they've come up with a new police force to ensure that we get rid of this disease, and that is called MPI, the Ministry for Primary Industries. Now, this group of people is set up ex-army soldiers, and it is a militarised police force that now has the backing of the government to enter any farm in New Zealand, take whatever they want, shoot any stock they want. If a farmer doesn't agree with that, they will be heavied and threatened with death. They are made to sign non-disclosure orders, and their stock are culled. They have no say in this. Funnily enough, wherever this disease is, Fonterra own the milk shares on these properties. So by shooting all the farmers' stock, they now no longer have the equity to face and pay for their big loans. So MPI is coming in and going, oh, you poor farmer, you've lost all your equity because we had to shoot your stock in front of you and make you go half mental. But we'll give you a payout and you can run off to the city so long as you sign this non-disclosure order. And part of that payout is the taking of their land. So all this farmland in New Zealand is being stolen off our farmers by stealth of this MPI. And the big corporations will own these farms soon. Okay, now this is going to happen in the private sector with people's land and houses everywhere else, but at the moment it's concentrating on the farmland. So sooner or later they will own all the farmland in New Zealand. That's the next part of their agenda.
It sounds like I mean that's a grander scale, but sort of like what they do with Monsanto here with the crops that they do.
I think much worse. I'm looking at the chemical here because somebody had actually said anything with fluorine in it is disconcerting, and they're right.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Fluorine is a very nasty thing, and I'm actually reading the actual what happens when you take sodium fluoroacetate, and you're exactly right. It affects the Krebs cycle, affects the citric acid cycle, and it does affect the amount of ATP production. And there's a lot of metabolic stuff that goes on as you have looked into this stuff when it comes to the energy production and the metabolizing of these things. And this is some nasty metabolization that goes on with this, like seriously nasty stuff.
It's even gotten to the kiwi bird, I believe, hasn't it? It's starting to you've had several of your national bird that have stumbled upon this.
The kiwis too. They actually had tagged kiwis, and the ones they tagged for study died.
Yeah, that's right. They quite often they'll monitor a group. We have like one of our banks over here, the Bank of New Zealand, puts millions of dollars into saving these kiwis every year. So they come up with special enclosures and they tag them and monitor them and keep an eye on them. But then they'll come and do a big drop of 1080 and they'll kill like 80 here, 120 there, 70 there, 21 there. These are all covered up by docs so that the public don't get to see what they're actually killing. Another bird that's endangered over here is the kea. So they're bombing all these alpine areas with this 1080, and kea are very inquisitive birds, and they eat this 1080 and they die. So they have nearly made the kea extinct in New Zealand. They use little lies like saying Doc will say 25 million baby birds or eggs are eaten from the nest every year by these predators. But the only thing that kills 25 million of these birds a year is their filthy 1080. They just cover up and manipulate the facts, and their blatant lies become a half-truth that's accepted by the public. Any scientific study that they've asked to be done that shows the truth of what 1080 is doing, they will shelve it, and they'll get a new scientific study that suits their agenda. So we've got a lot of good scientific proof of what it does to the microbes in the soil and these birds. They'll say
And that's what tobacco
that
used to do.
killed a monitored
That's exactly what
kiwi,
tobacco used to do.
but what about the unmonitored ones?
Mm-hmm.
And this has been going on for a lot of years.
Tobacco used to do the same thing. They would get studies that would fit into what they how they wanted them to fit. So I mean, that's definitely not outside the realm of possibility for sure. My question is, you said that Alabama is the place that this is mainly manufactured, correct? But they're closing that factory. What will happen, or where will you get the supply of that once they shut down?
Okay, so either Japan or China still make this as well, but I have a strong belief that this is actually produced right here in New Zealand, and the Toll chemical company in Alabama has just been a bit of a front. They're using a lot of poison. This year, they reckon they imported 400. No, I better get that right. I think it was 430 tons of this poison into New Zealand. If you equate that, when it takes 120 milligrams to kill a person, you equate that into how many humans that can kill. And this is spread all over our land in 1 year. There's no justifying it. I think it was Senator DeFazio that actually shut the Toll chemical company down because of the fears that this can be used as a terrorist weapon. It was years ago the Americans were reporting that they were worried about it being dropped into a water supply, and yet here in New Zealand they are dropping this into our water supply all the time, more and more often.
Are there any has anybody, and I'm sure this is going to sound like a really dumb question, but it's one that I think needs to be asked. But I know that you guys have at least attempted to or tried to petition your government or something to it for another course of action. Has that happened and just been shut down, or what's going on with trying to do it what they would claim to be the right way, like taking it up through your bureaucrats and things like that?
Right. So we've done everything we can over the last 30, 40 years. A lot of other people have tried to. We've had petitions and we've had protests. We've lobbied and we've got scientists on our side, and we've sent countless emails and requests. They do not want to find a solution because they will not be able to complete their Agenda 21 without 1080. They have given us nothing but a brick wall. They are not open to dialogue whatsoever. And they do everything they can to discredit people like myself that are trying to fight this and bring it out in the public. They have a huge amount of money. We're all poor people. We just give a shit about what's going on. We want something left for our children. They have an unlimited budget. They have the media under their belt. This is a very hard thing for us to fight. And there's no way we can win without international help and international condemnation. We have been sending the word out internationally, and good people like yourselves are helping to get that around for us. This is not acceptable in this day and age, just on the torture and the cruelty side of it alone, without the breach of our rights. I was having a look through the United Nations human rights the other day. We don't have many left that they haven't already taken away from us. It's going to be too late for New Zealanders soon. We can't protest on the water against big oil companies anymore. They've made that illegal. And over these next few months, they'll be trying to shut our protests down in any way they can as well. And soon it will be illegal for us to do the sort of things on Facebook that we're doing now. They've already brought tighter controls in earlier this year on what we can put on Facebook. They're taking these rights away, and people are still asleep. They've got to wake up to what's going on.
And what gives you, I think, the most let me one second. I just have a statement, Steve, and then you can ask him the question.
Sure.
But when in researching this, what I think lends the most most notion to kind of take a pause and step back is the fact that anything that you can find on this, and I looked into it heavy for the past 2 weeks. This has been a problem that people have been outspoken on in New Zealand for decades. I mean, it goes back decades, and you can find unlimited amount of outrage and trying to get a light shined on this. This is not something that's just come out new, but it's something that is, I think, isolated and not well known outside of that country. But you can go back and you can actually look at decades of not only pictures of the carnage that it leaves, because it's bad. I mean, the destruction that thing leaves in its path is just horrible. Of course, you're probably going to get people that are going to say they'll roll their eyes at the whole the New World Order thing that you said, and you should, you're going to expect that. That's something that people are skeptical, obviously, of things like that. But what you can't be skeptical of is the photographic evidence of what this thing does to the wildlife and the ecosystem there. In that, I mean, that's just undeniable. So I think that's something that needs to be, without question, looked at 110% seriously. All right, Steve, what were you gonna say?
I find it weird that the New Zealand is like the only place that actually uses the stuff. They use 80% of the world's supply of 1080, and that does indicate a red flag, because if this stuff was as benign as they're making out to be, which by the way they're not. I mean, even they admit it stuff will kill you. They do have warning signs for dogs, for children, but why? It's just amazing that one specific place uses this and nobody else will, because everybody else basically says you got to be out of your mind. If we ever had something like this in America, there'd be a shitstorm beyond shitstorms, because this stuff is nasty stuff. I just literally read how it works. It basically shuts down all cellular respiration. It ruins the oxidative phosphorylation, and it basically prevents you producing ATP. You die. It's a nasty way to go.
Stuff. Something sinister is going on. I mean, 80% of the consumption rate in that. I mean,
if I'm not mistaken, cyanide works in a very similar way.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about New Zealand and the fact that we are a big laboratory experiment. They're going to roll this out to other parts of the world, and I think they are already. I think Canada's starting to use a bit now, and Australia. They're going to roll this out on you guys too. They have other ways of poisoning you in America with your roundups and all that sort of thing, and your chemtrails in your sky.
We have Trump.
We get that too. we are the test bed. A dock worker was giving us an interview not long ago, and he actually came out and he said that this area has a different prescription. That's the first time I've heard it referred to as a prescription, but that's exactly what it is. They've been testing this for years and years. They now know what levels are suitable to control the people and make them sick. Even to that other level of the conspiracy theory, you've got a very happy bunch of pharmaceutical companies out there, because we've got a whole country full of sick, dying people, and they are making billions and billions of dollars off our misery and our sickness in this country as we speak.
Sure.
It's hard to prove all these links because we haven't got these medical statistics and records there, but it's happening right in front of everybody's eyes in this day and age. Good old New Zealand, clean, green, 100% pure. I bloody doubt it, mate. It's 100% toxic.
I think
we're trying everything we can.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, with when you said the conspiracy theory thing, I think this is a case where I'm not very conspiracy minded. I'm just not a very conspiracy minded person. But there's something about this that is just off. With the things you're saying, and what Steve just said, that 80% of the country is using the world's supply of this. Something is definitely off there, and it goes back to what I said a second ago. Ultimately, though, you have to look at whether you believe in conspiracies or not. Put that aside and look at what it's actually doing to the people there and the wildlife there, because it's actually having consequences, no matter what the reason is, no matter what, somebody may, what the government says the reasons are, what the people who live there say the reasons are. There's actual harm that's being done by the use of this when it doesn't need to be done. Like, there's no legitimate reason to still be using a chemical like this and dropping it from planes just arbitrarily throughout the country. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of like, remember, them using DDT. I mean, if we went back to using DDT, there'd be a huge uproar and things of that nature. I know people mix a lot of things together, and I mean, I don't fall into conspiracy stuff at all. But Kyle and I have looked into this, and what he's saying as far as the 1080, there's a legit concern. There is no way ifs and buts. You can't look at it and say this is not a problem. It's a problem.
Right.
And I don't know how far it extends. I don't know how deep that rabbit hole goes, but the fact that it does exist, they're dropping it in areas that are close to civilization, places where dogs have access to this. Dogs have died from this. There's no question. As he said, there have been actual human deaths as well. If a child, it gets exposed to this stuff, they will die. Do you want stuff like cyanide being sprayed around your schools? I mean, because that's basically what this is, and not just like pesticides, like like an herbicide. This is concentrated death, is what this is. I don't know how else to explain it. Concentrated death, and it's water soluble.
Yeah, and we've picked it up from our schoolyard right here in Blackpool. 8 or 10 years ago, they did a drop, and there was pellets all over the bloody playground. The kids are still going to school. It's absolutely insane that our government can get away with this in this day and age. Like I said, 100 meters behind people's properties. How many people's dogs or cats will go walking out the back? How long before a child goes walking out the back and picks up one of those pellets? It's
what can we do, Alan? You have an audience base that will see this, and for people who get angry enough and concerned enough, what realistically can, especially us over here in the States, what can we do when we're oceans away from New Zealand?
Well, I see your previous presidents over there quite happy to go to war against people that have these chemical weapons. Saddam Hussein and anybody else that's using chemical weapons on their own people. Your government will jump at the chance to go to war with them and annihilate them. We don't want a war here. We need help from people like your government to come over here and lock these bloody terrorists up, because that's all they are. Our Prime Minister is a terrorist. She is torturing everything cruelly to death in this country, right in front of the whole world. And everybody seems to think it's all right and it's all very pretty and lovely, but it's not. Nothing could be further from the truth. How many people have they killed in our country? Every time they do a drop in my community, I watch another 4 or 5 of my friends die. North Island is just getting us in their water supplies now. We've had 30 years of it. We see the results. A small community like Harry down on the west coast, to have 4 cases of motor neuron disease in a small community with 300 people. You look at a city's incidence of motor neuron disease, it's probably similar. A city that hasn't had 1080 dropped in their water. The birth defects, the mitochondrial disorders, the miscarriages and abortions created by this bloody chemical is so rampant in our society. We, as the people on the ground in the front line of this, we see it all the time, and it keeps getting glossed over and covered over by our medical officers of health. We don't have a right to get into those statistics to prove a link. We need help from scientists and doctors in your country. We need your president to have an interest in what's going on in here. If we've got gold and coal and oil, they can go into any other country under the guise of wanting that and create a chemical weapon scenario. We have a bloody chemical weapon scenario right here. Our government and all these politicians and this Department of Conservation are a bunch of bloody terrorists. They should be behind bars, rotting the rest of their days out, but they're running free, making the laws, living off the pig's back in this country. We need the international condemnation.
I mean, I'm sure, as you well know, something like that would be, I mean, just the amount of like the diplomatic ties and I mean, you know, politics is one of the shadiest businesses. They're going to do whatever is more profitable and more beneficial to the, you know, whatever party or regime is in power. What can, like, aside from on the grand scale, I know that would be the quickest and most beneficial intervention, but in terms of like regular everyday people that might see this, is there any place they can go, any website, group they can learn more, or any way they can get involved, like themselves, something that you know and can guarantee can be kind of put forth or done to help you guys out in that case? Because it has to, you know, it has to trickle up, so to speak. It has to get
Right. Yeah.
a grassroots movement going, and then light a fire under whoever.
Yes. Well, that's what we started with the Hikoi, was to get people
Funny.
awake and
Right.
and get that happening. So we have quite a few pages in New Zealand now that are set up. We have one in America called Americans Against 1080. They have links there, I think, that will hook you up with our websites. The most important factual one for people to be able to educate themselves on is the Graph Boys TV-wild.com. They've done all these little videos and documentaries on what's actually going on. We have the Hikoi of a Poison Nation page, has a fundraising page and a give a little page. We're trying to get enough money to create our own propaganda system, if you like. We need to educate the public in New Zealand. It's like any country. We've got 3/4 of this country asleep, being sheep. They're not awake to what's going on. We have a good majority of people that are awake, and that's what we need to do. Because, like I say, it's not just our country, it's your country that's got this coming too. You've got other methods at play bringing you guys down. The world needs to wake up to all this New World Order and these Agenda 21s and all that, and be awake and educate the brothers and sisters around the world. You know, that's what we need here. We could have a perfectly sustainable existence in New Zealand without foreign trade and without the need for the United Nations. You know, the United Nations is part of this big corruption. You know, you've got 26 member states or whatever that signed up to allowing their people to be bombed by these chemtrails, which go hand in hand with the 1080 poisoning. If you've got an antibiotic resistance bred into the people through what they eat and drink and the 1080, then you can drop these biological weapons out of the sky and all these heavy metals and make them all sick. You know, they're going to be indebted to these pharmaceutical companies and keep spending the money there. So it's a win-win for the rich people. I don't expect any help from the United Nations on this. We, the people, are the only ones that are going to make a difference. In New Zealand, we need enough people to march into Parliament next time and kick these bastards out and lock them up. Bring in, you know, we have the right to our own justice, the right to police our own communities. At the moment, we have a police system that is at the beck and call of our government to protect the Crown. It's no longer a Royal New Zealand Police Force put here to protect the people. It now protects New Zealand.com or whatever you want to call it, you know. New Zealand is a business now. Our whole government is fake and illegal. A business can't run a government, but here we are. They are. They're running our government. Big money, big business, you know. I don't know how far involved all your politicians are in this New World Order in the grander scheme of things. Where do you go to help for help? To us. There is no justice, just us, you know. We need to wake people up. That's the best thing anybody can do, is spread the word and keep waking people up. If people have got some spare dollars they can help out, go onto our Hikoi of a Poison Nation page, give us a bit of dosh so we can get our own advertising and that going. We're doing, like I say, none of us are rich. We haven't got a great big wealthy benefactor list to keep pumping money into this. And this is a huge fight. It's a very important fight, and we need to wake the rest of New Zealand up. So we have got enough people to get rid of this corrupt government and these corrupt politicians. You know, the corruption is such a small amount of people, and we're such a huge amount of people. We need to all be awake so we can get rid of this problem.
Do you mind if we since we're hitting close to the hour and a half mark, if we ask a couple or get a couple questions from people who might be watching if they have any, and have you
Yeah, no,
answer
sure.
any of those?
Yep.
Steve, you see any super chats or people have any questions?
No super chats. I think the biggest questions they've been talking about is they want to know about chemtrails because and I think that's kind of a tangential thing. Obviously, I don't buy into chemtrails. I don't buy into many conspiracy theories. I kind of like to keep it on the 1080 if possible. But since a lot of people are asking about the chemtrails, why I guess they want to know why you're relating the chemtrails to the 1080.
Okay, so like I was saying, with the antibiotic resistance bred into people over here through eating and drinking these non-lethal doses of 1080 in our water and in our food and our game animals, with the antibiotic resistance bred into us, I'm not a big one on the chemtrails, but I know they happen. I know there's heavy metals in them, and I believe, because of personal experience, that there is blood spore and other diseases mixed in with that. I know this for several reasons. I watch my friends and my family in the middle of summer when there's no flus or colds around suddenly become ill with a very debilitating, like a pneumonia type flu. This will last for anywhere from 90 days to 120 days, sometimes longer. And it knocks the crap out of a healthy, grown man to the point where he's permanently damaged, can't handle the cold, very weak, lethargic. This has to come from somewhere, especially when these people that are getting sick aren't mixing with a lot of people, and they're definitely not mixing with sick people. So we can only assume it's coming from these chemtrails. We see them
Why
in the
would you make that
sky. I know
assumption?
the difference.
No, I'm just kind of curious. What is it you make the assumption that it has to come to chemtrails? I've done a little bit of researching on chemtrails. I've never seen any evidence of any kind for chemtrails to do leading anything because there's no chemtrails to me don't even exist. They're contrails. They're due to a change in the atmosphere because you're leaving a low pressure area, you're having humidity come out of the atmosphere, and you're having what's called water vapor appear. But this
Right,
notion that there's heavy metals and anything, there's never been a single test that ever demonstrated any of those things.
right.
So why do
I
you place it on that? I mean, I'm sure things have happened, but why do you go to that as a possible explanation rather than something far more plausible? If I can ask.
Well, that's right. The difference between a contrail and a chemtrail, from what I see, is kerosene is burnt in aeroplanes. So when they're flying along, generally on a summer's day, you'll see that contrail disappear a few hundred meters behind the plane. The
No, not
chemtrails,
necessarily. They can last several. They can last 2 hours or more. Ask any pilot. A contrail can last several hours, especially if they're flying in a crisscross pattern for the VORs. So
right?
they
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to last a few minutes.
So being a small country, we have a few international airports here from different ends of the town. There's no explanation for the track that a lot of these trails are taking. Um, they'll be crisscrossing the sky. You can go up to the high mountainous areas and look above the cloud on a rainy day on the west coast, and you can see these chemtrails crisscrossing the sky. Way too much for any international flights or that. Like I say, I don't get into this chemtrail thing a lot. I've never studied it. I have seen the heavy metal particulate dispersers and their patent numbers in planes when I'm looking at things like Investigate magazines and these other conspiracy theory type things. Because of
Yep.
the amount of people in a certain rural area here, you know everybody, and you know when people are sick. And a lot of these illnesses seem to come in the middle of summer when there's no sick people around. It's just another theory, I guess. But I
Sure.
certainly know what the
Yeah.
1080 poisoning does. And like
Sure,
you
and
say, we're
I think
better
you're
off
legit
probably
on that, by the
on the
way.
topic.
I think you're very legit on the 1080 poisoning. I think there's a huge concern there. Um, the other question would be, what would you what would you recommend to control some of these rodents? Because like obviously there's a problem with that. I think you would agree. What would you recommend to substitute, if they got rid of the 1080, what would you recommend instead as a plausible means to control that population that is a matter of concern?
Yeah, so there is an amount of concern, and that concern gets bigger and bigger the more 1080 they drop. Like I was saying, when you take the raptors away out of that food chain, you are left with an explosion of rats and stoats and mice. Okay, now New Zealand's always done things back in the day, but like 60s and 70s, everything was trapping and shooting and bringing food home for your family, and that worked very well. There's a lot of areas in New Zealand that haven't ever had 1080 on them, and those forest ecosystems are in a perfect balance. They have possums, they have few rats, few stoats, there's plenty of native birds, and everything is harmoniously in balance. But when you take that away...
The police are here to take away your firearms license right now.
Okay, so this is what happens when you speak out about 1080.
Yeah.
Looks like the police are here to steal your firearms license right now. I'm going to have to cut this short, guys.
Will you please let us know what happens with that?
Yeah,
will you please let us know?
I will
go do what
I'll
you
give you a
do,
text
but
later.
let us know, okay?
Yeah,
Please do
all
that.
right,
All right,
thanks, guys.
you gotta do it. Thank you for your insight on this,
Yeah.
very much so. Okay.
Absolutely.
No worries, guys.
That's crazy.
Cheers.
Wow.
This is just what we get in New Zealand when you stand up and try and fight the government.
Send me
Cheers,
a text later, Alan. Let me know that you guys are all right. All right.
Okay, thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Alan.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
Whoa.
Secret police, baby.
That's creepy.
That's crazy, man. No, that is creepy.
Creepy.
Well, I mean, like I said, just because somebody has a lot of maybe some kind of conspiratorial ideas doesn't mean that there's some of it not true. I happen to believe him on the 1080 stuff. I literally, legitimately think there's a huge problem there, and just because you kind of wrap it around it with other things, you have to take things compartmentalized, and I think that particular issue needs to be addressed.
Right, and I don't necessarily. I don't believe the New World Order stuff either. I mean, that's just me. Who knows if there's something to it? I just don't believe it. But the signs point to something is happening when it's factual that the country is using 80% of the world's resource in this poison. That's bizarre when it's as small of a country as it is compared to the rest of the world. I mean, if you were to tell me, like, pick a country that you would expect to use 80% of this poison, of course, people would go to Russia immediately. But I mean, they're not doing Russia. I think something is. I don't know that it goes to the extent of the New World Order, but something's not right, and that shit right there that just happened is crazy.
That's bizarre. And people say, well, we only had one side. Well, if anyone wants to find somebody who wants to be pro 1080, we'll bring them on. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that you're. And I don't mind one-sided conversations. I mean, you don't always have to have two sides and things. Look, this is something that somebody will come on and they'll present something, with information that anybody can go validate, right? I mean, what's the other side? Let's go poison everybody and kill the wildlife and possibly kill dogs and children. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think there's another side either, to be honest.
There's not another side on this. What this was is an opportunity to raise awareness about a situation that's going on in another country. Now, to the extent no one knows that, but the facts are that poison is being used in an area or of an entire country when it's senseless to use. Senseless. It's having disastrous effects on the country. So there doesn't need to be another side here. We're talking about a poison that the United States, other countries are wiping their hands with, shutting down that last place in Alabama that manufactures this. There's something sinister about this poison, and there's a reason why we don't use it over here.
Yeah, there's somebody just said that they read 1080 was safe. I just read literally out of ResearchGate how it works, and it literally just said that it is not considered to be a humane poison. I don't know what you're referring to.
How can poison be safe? And they're dropping it from planes, like just all over.
It's a very effective poison. It literally kills microbes, plants, animals across the board. Anything that produces ATP, which is your metabolic way of producing energy, right? it shuts down that process, and that living
I lose my
thing.
faith in
So
humanity.
you carry everything runs on this pretty much. Everything has this.
Poison and safe don't belong in the same sentence.
Yeah. How can you say that? I lose my faith in humanity.
Yeah, what does it say? What does it say? Poison. I don't know what that means either. What does it say? Poison. Okay. Well, I mean, there are some things that are poisonous were safe in small amounts. Alcohol is a poison, and but it's.
But they're not dropping it like raindrops from helicopters.
I wish they would.
Airplane.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Oh, go outside, open wide, and get drunk.
Yeah. Is there nothing that we can't all come together and agree on? Can we not all say that poison is bad and that you shouldn't give animals a slow death without somebody trying to come in and say and bring the other side? My God,
it's a little bizarre to me too.
It's sad. It's very sad. It's very sad.
Yeah, but, I agree. But this was interesting. I mean, I think he was informed quite a bit about this topic, and I gotta tell you, that was the most bizarre ending I've ever seen, where you actually have people at the door going, "We're coming for your firearm license."
That was
how scary as shit is that, dude? Crazy.
That was crazy.
I hope he's okay. I'm sure.
He might be the martyr video for this guy.
I hope he's okay, man. I hope he doesn't they don't mess him up or something. He's like a nice dude.
I'm gonna have him sending me a text message to make sure that he's
almost like all right. I think he's gonna get swatted or something, right?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, guys. This was a fascinating day. I think it was overall a good day.
Is it over?
My blood's boiling still, I think, from all the excitement that we've had. But yeah, if you can go to that, I'm gonna put the links in the description for the things that he spoke about. Some of them that I didn't have the links to beforehand, but I'll go back and put all those through. So if you can and want to, please go support them and join their page so that you can stay up to date about what's going on. Either way, what's happening over there, no matter to the extent that it goes, it's still a horrible thing and needs to be addressed, no doubt. But as always, we appreciate you guys hanging with us. We will be back. You will finally get to see Papa Steve in Debate Action Live tomorrow.
DNA is not a code either.
He will be.
You're looking forward to this, aren't you? You're looking forward. I mean, who's going to be? Who's the other person? Because I'm going to be going against John. So who you bringing in?
Shannon's going to be with me, but
Shannon. Okay. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I just don't know where I fall on this. I really don't. I don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak.
Watch both presentations. Yeah, just watch both. And I got to tell you, I think we agree on 90% of it. I think the stuff that we don't agree on is going to be a semantic argument. And so I don't think it's going to be like Steve won or John won. I think it's going to be like they both made good points. However, overall, I think if people ask that question, is DNA code, the most people are going to answer no. Like I answer no, because it's not a code.
There's still people saying 1080 is okay. Jesus Christ.
Weird. Go look at what that shit does. It's not okay.
Worse than a flat earther, I think.
It's like DDT, yes. Let's go, DDT, bro, DDT, or.
I heard that what makes a fantastic foot massager is a chainsaw. I heard that is just great for your.
It gets your, like, what is it, descaler or something? What do they do for the bottom of the feet or whatever the hell they are?
Oh yeah,
I give up.
Yeah, petty.
Yeah. Petty, thank you.
All right, guys.
I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah. No more dumpster fires for a while. We'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Until then, take care of each other. And if you think 1080 is okay, go eat some.
Natural selection at work.
Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.